Okay. So, one of the things that's challenging about kids with Tourette's and determining whether what you're hearing is stuttering or a verbal tick is if they do the verbal behavior just while essentially trying to sit quiet. So let's say that they tend to repeat a word as one of their tics. You'll hear it even when they're not directly trying to communicate. Does that make sense? Versus stuttering happens as part of communication, part of your attempts to communicate. I actually had a kid on my caseload at Vanderbilt who was not making w- progress in treatment the way we had hoped. And so we were trying to figure out if we needed to change things treatment wise. And at around that time, his dad expressed that he was a little concerned that he may have Tourette's. And so we were like, okay. So we made a referral to I think he went to a developmental pediatrician is what it as I recall. And one of the things we started looking for was did he do these verbal behaviors outside the context of trying to communicate? And so one of the activities I did as part of group is we always did shared reading. And so he, even in the parts like where I was just reading the book, or I had paused to turn a page, or I had paused because I was going to ask a question, he would vocalize, like he would say, he would repeat this word or a behavior or sound or I don't remember exactly how it sounded anymore, but it was in complete absence of attempts to communicate. So we were like, oh, wow, I think that is a verbal tick. So he both stuttered and had a verbal tick. And so sometimes it's really challenging to try to figure out what's what. But so I'm going to circle back to kids on the autism spectrum tend to have their stuttering tends to be different than what we've already talked about. So we've talked about repeating sounds and syllables, the bat or the dog, things like that, or da 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 dog. That's not that common, but maybe or do donut. Um, and then whole word repetitions are just exactly that. And then talking about prolongations and blocks. Well, kids on the autism spectrum tend to, and like I said, I've said multiple times now, stuttering tends to occur at the beginning of an utterance, especially on the first sound of at the beginning of an utterance, um, and or at the beginning of clauses. So kids on the autism spectrum tend to repeat the last word or the last sound of a word or a syllable in the middle of a word, which is completely different than what I mean. There's no typical person who stutters, but than what we generally see in people who stutter, children who stutter specifically. So I've had former students over the years get in touch with me, and I have this kid who does this really weird kind of stuttering, and oh, tell me about it, describe it to me, can you demonstrate, what it sounds like? And they'll do it, and So does this kid, is it possible that this client is on the spectrum? Totally possible. It's really distinct. It's very different than the way I've described stuttering to you last week before last. All right. Uh, any other questions, comments? Any questions about the report assignment? Nope. Did the videos help? Good. Liz, were you going to say something? Okay. I just feel like usually, like when someone turns their camera on, it's because they're gonna have something to say. Okay, good. Um, did you feel like the report assignment was a useful thing to do? Okay, good. At least now you have like the beginnings of words you can use, which was my goal. Okay, I know I still owe you discussion board posts. I know I do. I'm sorry.
You don't
Um,
owe us anything. We don't have to do them.
all right. At some point, we're going to do a discussion board posts. I promise. Um, so like right now, let me stop recording for a second. That's fine. All right. So resume. Okay, so when we left off um, last week, we had gone through all of the different pieces of the interview, and we had talked about the information that you get from norm reference tests. And that takes us to um, talking about um, oh my God, I'm sorry. I've not so I've not slept real well either. So the kids and I are sleeping in the downstairs. So Tyler's on the couch, and there's like a second master bedroom on the other part of the house, the old part of the house. So we're sleeping over there, and just so we're all like in the same space. And so Riley slept out in the living room the first night, and then but it was a love seat, and she was like, yeah, this is not working. So I was going to come sleep in the other part of the house, and I was just like, look, I'm too tired. I'm going to lay in the middle of the bed, and you guys can just, make space on the other side of me. And so they were like, okay. So it was Alexis on my right and Riley on my left, um and five dogs. The only dogs not in the bed with us were the biggest dogs. So it was really warm, which was cool. No, like that's an oxymoron, but it was really warm, which was fun. Uh, and very cozy. All right. So I am going to share my screen, which should be interesting too. So the house is really so the house was built, like the first part of the house was built a long time ago, and it's not very big. I mean, I'm guessing it's maybe over a little around 1,000 square feet. So the bedroom that the three of us and the five dogs are staying in um is maybe 10 by 10. Um you know, and the bathroom's big enough to fit a toilet, tub, and sink, and that's it. Like this is not, you know, the HGTV home part of the home. So and then it's just a yeah, it's so that part of the house isn't very big. Well, again, she has 3 kids, and so at some point they added on to the house, and so they made it L shaped. So there's the front, there's the old house that, you know, kind of fronts the road, and then the new house comes off the new part of the house comes off the back. And so there are 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms on this side of the house. And then a basement that's unfinished. So, and it has central heating and air and all of that on the new side, but the old side is a wood stove. So I had to build a fire, which I haven't done in an age. So, and the wood was wet, so it was smoking like a bar in the 40s. I mean, it was, yeah, so it's been an adventure, to say the least. Um, and my biggest dog did us the service of being car sick when we first got here. So that was awesome too. All right, I'm just going to share my screen. So I don't have all my multiple screens, which is sad. Oh, I didn't know you could do this iPhone, iPad thing. I'm going to try that next week. Just, you know, because I don't look inept enough on a regular week. All right, starting from the beginning. Oh, hey, before I get started, you nunchucks better tell me the next time I'm sharing a screen and you're looking at the presenter view. I mean, I have a whole 2-hour recording of the presenter view. Nobody thought to say, hey, Dr. Richards, we're not looking at one slide. We're looking at all the slides. We're looking at the 2 slides. Why y'all gonna do me like that? I mean, dang.
Sometimes professors don't know how to switch it over, so I just assumed that that's how you wanted it to be.
No, I know how to switch it over. I just didn't know that it was on the wrong one. Jeez, I thought we had a better relationship than that, y'all. I was very disappointed when I went to look at the video and I was like, no, they let that happen. I just was very disappointed. I have no idea where the chat is now. Like it's probably on some screen I can't see. So hold on. I gotta change my view so that I can see the chat too. There it is. Yeah, it is a fun behind the scenes look. All right. And you can see too that I am not one of those people that has like copious notes on my note slide, you know, under my slides, that I clearly am winging it based on what's on the slide, which I doubt comes as a surprise to any of y'all. I like to think that it just reflects that I know my shit and I don't need a bunch of notes. Y'all can think what you want. The truth is somewhere in the middle, I'm sure. All right, here we go. All right, so we're going to talk about surveys and questionnaires. We're going to talk about the Stalker Probe. We're going to talk about the Kitty Cat, the SPI, which is the Stuttering Prediction Instrument, the CAT-R, which is the Communication Attitudes Test, revised, the CAI, which is Communication Attitudes Inventory, and the LCB, which is the Locus of Control of Behavior, which is too many ofs. I think it got translated from language that it made more sense to be LCB, but that's what it is. Okay. So let's talk about the Stalker Probe. So this is one of my favorite things to use. All right, are you guys looking at the stalker probe? Because I don't trust you not to tell me you're not. You are? Thank you. Thank you. All right. So remember, you can make it bigger on your screen by using the view button, but I'm going to try to make it bigger on my screen too. So
Sorry, I actually only see the PowerPoint right now.
really?
Am I the only one?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you meant like, were you on the right slide? Yeah, we can only see your PowerPoint.
Same.
Okay. Telling you, you guys. Are you looking at a Word document now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So, the I like to use, so this started out, I mean, I don't even know how old this measure is. It ain't young. It's a lot older than me, okay? Which again tells you not young. So its full name is the Stalker Probe Test of Communicative Competence. And it used to be one of those kits like you get with the PLS, it's all of these, it's a box full of objects and like all of this other stuff. But it over time it went out of, I actually think there may be one in the clinic closet. Like I know when I first started, there was one in the clinic closet, and I was super excited because I hadn't seen one like in its original flesh, because we just used the form. And quite honestly, I just made up, like I just found objects that fit the question. So I don't even know anymore what the original objects were. But the cool thing about it is that you can use this in therapy too. And I used to do it all the time. I would um, I would have a brown bag with random objects in it, and I'm talking random, like the one of those squishy snake things that has like glitter and stuff in it. I would have like one of those in there, and then we had these really weird erasers that and like a troll with its hair and the whole thing, and just all kinds of like a matchbox car, etc. Because you can, and the more unexpected the item, the better off you are, because what you're looking for is at what point does the person start to stutter, become disfluent. So for the purposes of the Stalker probe, you are actually marking it um, as a 0, or I just did dashes or pluses. If they have any kind of disfluency, so an whatever, they get 0 points for that. And what you tend to find is that people will fall apart at the higher level questions. So for kids, elementary age, like is adults and teens, you just go straight down. So you would start, let me get my um, fancy drawing. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do the point to it. So for an adult or a teenager, you would start at the top, which is actually level 2. For uh, younger child or a school age child, you go in order. So you go question 1, and then question 2, and then question 3, or 3, level 3, level 4, level 5. So since stuttering tends to be a disorder of childhood, and it was evaluating children very close to the onset of their stuttering, I did more of the start at level 1 and go up to level 5. So I had a wooden block that I had acquired somewhere. I don't even remember. It was in a set of blocks, go figure. And I would pull that out, and the first question, is it round or is it square? And that's a one-word answer, right? That's a forced choice, round, square. So you know you're getting, again, one-word answer. And then you go to the next one. What is it? It's a block. So now, or they can even say a block, and that's fine too. So now you've put together 2 words. And then the next one is who would you buy it for? And that takes a little bit of thought. Who would I want to buy a block for? Anyone. So maybe that's the answer. I wouldn't buy it. Or for my brother. Okay. Or for my mom. So that's 3 words. Tell me all about it. It's a block, it's wood, it's I think mine was purple. It's purple. Um, I don't know. I think it was a little bit beat up. So sometimes kids would say that, and it's old, it's beat up, whatever. So now I've gone from 1 word to 2 or 3 words to phrases. And then the last one is the level 5 is make up your own story about it. So I would always demonstrate this one because you don't really want like a super long story because you're trying to get your work done. So because I always had a pen, I would say, so you're going to make up a story. I'm going to show you, I'm going to go first. What I would usually say, okay, this is my pen. I got it at Office Max the other day. I really like it because it's fine point. The end. Um, Sometimes my pen was one that I accidentally took from the receptionist, so that was my story. This is my pen. I didn't have a pen, and I went up to the front desk, and I ended up walking away with this one. The end. Um, so they tell a story about it. So this is a block. It's really old. It is purple. I don't know why I have to tell a story about it. The end. So I said, somewhere in there. So that would get 0 points. And like I said, it's a great way. You can use these questions to, as therapy activities to get your client to use their strategies or to just as and it's called a probe because you're probing to see at what level of linguistic complexity the person can maintain fluency. So we had this little spiky porcupine looking eraser thing. So the questions are slightly, whoops, I forgot. Gotta stop annotating. Clear. Okay. So the questions are a little bit different depending on the object, as one would hope. So this one was, is it real or a toy? So let's say we have an adult this time. Tell me your own story about it. Tell me everything you know about it. What is it made of? Is it real or a toy? Where can you buy it? And you're looking for, again, plus or minus if it's decide, or 0 or 1. 1 if it's fluent, 0 if there's a disfluency. So they're obviously grouped into question 5 questions. So groups of 5 questions. So we used to do, let's see, ball, penny spoon. So what's that? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's what I thought, but I didn't want to say we did 5 and then it turned out we did 4. So we always did essentially 25 question prompts, like, so 5 groups of 5. So the porcupine, and then I had a ball. Is it for a child or a grown-up? So y'all see how this works?
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So when I gave this with the clinic, I kind of just received it and they said, do it, but there wasn't anything telling me what each level equated to. So I didn't know what it was telling me. Is there some resource that like I can go to, like, okay, my client exhibited the most stuttering events on level 4, so that I need to go to 3 and work on blank?
So it's almost that linear. So if they have just fluency or stuttering, like at level 1, you know that you're going to have to back up to sounds or syllables to aim for fluency, because, and it also tells you something about severity too. If someone is stuttering, so at the single word level, that they are much more likely to be a severe stutterer than someone who doesn't start to stutter until level 4 or 5. So at level 4, you are deep into phrase level. And at level 5, that's more of, tell me your own story about it. That's more of a connected speech thing, where you are having to formulate language about something that's not right in front of you. So again, like with the ball, like these beginning questions are about what is in the room with you, which it's a lot easier to be fluent when you're talking about something that's essentially in the present and in the present tense that you can look at, versus having to talk about something that is not in the room, or at least elements of it are unknown to the person you're talking with. So level 4 essentially is longer phrases, and level 5 would be spontaneous conversation level speech. So level 2 is short phrases. Again, well, level 2, who makes it? Usually it says on your pen, like in sometimes if I needed to do an extra one, I would use my pen as one of the objects, and they would say it's made by Pilot, right? And you can see it, it's right on it, which is so maybe you even get the whole phrase, it's made by Pilot, or they say, I don't know, oh, Pilot. And then versus tell me all about it. It's a black pen made by Pilot. It's precise B5, extra fine, whatever. I can look right at it and I can tell you about it. And that's level 4, but it's a lot more words together. So those are like long phrases, definitely sentence level. And level 5, tell me your own story about it. Like I said, at that point, you're at conversation.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah. I don't remember. I think that the stalker probe is like use the stalker probe is like you need the story keeper for your village to pass it on, because I don't know that a manual exists anymore. So it does tell you, you can use a plus for fluency, a minus for non-fluency. And then in the end, you look to see what level they tend to be. Sorry. I'm so sorry. That's so rude. The level that they tend to be disfluent on. So again, it may show that your client tends to be start to exhibit more disfluencies at level 4 and level 5, which is more common. Any questions about that? Any other questions? That was a great question. I'm glad you asked. And you can see in the comments, were there secondary behaviors, were blocking, whatever. And I would even put, a lot of times I would put notes like in the margin if because with the minus, you don't know whether it was a disfluency or whether it was stuttering. So I would always put like I would put just like a D for disfluency, and then I would put what it was. Was it a phrase repetition or a revision or interjection or whatever else? And then I would put again, same thing, I would put notes in the margin because it tells you something about, again, about severity. If they could have gotten a 0 out of 25 because they said at the beginning of every utterance, which is a completely different thing than the person who blocked at the beginning for 3 seconds at the beginning of every utterance and had a 0 out of 25 fluent. Does that make sense? Thank you. All right. What other questions do you have about that? Nay? Okay. So let's move on and let's talk about stop share. Go back to the PowerPoint. All right, so that's the Stalker Pro. Okay, so Stalker Probe. So now we're going to talk about the kitty cat. And I'm showing you this version because this is not the one that's copyrighted. The copyrighted version of the kitty cat, I believe, is only 10 questions. We were part of the norming sample for this measure. And so we had the full version that they whittled down. So, but this gives you an idea of the questions that are on it. So you want to get, remember I said that if if the client or the client's family showed concern about their speech, then it was worth doing treatment. Well, this is the way that you try to get an idea of how concerned is your client about the stuttering. So, some of these require a little bit of a follow-up answer. So even if you even if they answer and you've got to count it is whatever they said. So let's see, do you think you are a good talker? Yes. Do you think that words sometimes get stuck in your mouth? Yes. Do you think you talk right? Yes. Do you think mom and dad like the way you talk? No. Why do you think that is? That gets a follow-up. You still mark it as no because they said no. And because the answer to that one is usually really interesting. Like, so I learned to ask the follow-up because the assumption is they think that their parents don't like the way they talk because they stutter. The answer I got way more than, because my words get stuck or anything to do with stuttering, was because they brought me here. Well, okay, that makes sense, right? They took you to see the talk doctor, so clearly they think something's wrong with the way you talk. So, like I said, that one always, always, always bears following up. Do you think people need to help you talk? Do you think talking is easy for you? Do you think talking is hard for you? The way you talk is good, words come out, you talk funny. That one too tends to need a little bit of follow-up. Like, so do you think you talk funny? Yes. Why do you think that? Whatever, they do some kind of weird shit and you're like, oh, it's not because they stutter, it's because they think they're funny. That's a totally different kettle of fish than the I think I talk funny because I stutter. So anyway, what you do is for every answer, so you think you're a good talker, yes, so that gets 0 points. So what you're doing is you're giving a word sometimes get stuck in my mouth, that's a 1, because that's something more typical of, like, if I ask y'all, do you think in general words sometimes get stuck in your mouth, you would likely say no. So if it's a question that the yes or the no is more typical of someone who stutters, then it gets 1 point. So you talk right, yes, so that's a 0, so that's great, right? So any question that indicates a negative perception of how they talk gets 1 point. Does that make sense? This thing actually does come with directions because it is in print. So this is just kind of the Reader's Digest version of that. Mom and Dad like the way you talk? No, so that would get 1 point. So the way this works is the higher the number of points, the more the worse the child's attitude is about their talking. Again, that may have something to do, that may be because they stutter, it may be because of some other reason in their heads. So you have to be a little bit careful because you're asking this of really small people. I think I've given this to like 3-year-olds. And it's up to, I think it says on the top, kindergarten. So it's young peanuts. So you don't even, a lot of times, but it has been normed. So there is, there is an expected range of scores for kids who stutter versus kids who don't. And of course, you will look in the manual. General rule is the higher the score, the more typical this attitude is of kids who stutter, and the more concerned they seem to be about the way they talk. What questions do you have about this one? Okay, moving on then. Oh, wow. I could give you guys mouse control over the slide. Anyway, I randomly clicked on the thing at the top that says remote control. All right, so the stuttering prediction instrument, I introduced a little bit last time. The purpose of it is to determine the level of risk that the child has to continue stuttering without intervention. Does that make sense? So if you score this and it comes out severe, it means that they are at a severe risk for continuing to stutter without intervention, as in they won't spontaneously recover. If they come out in the very mild to subclinical range, it means that it's not very likely that they will continue to stutter, even if they don't get intervention. So odds are they will spontaneously recover. So the very mild to subclinical population is the population of people that um, you're going to look at all the other factors, and if there are no red flags there, you're going to recommend reeval, or you can say with a good degree of confidence that they're going to be okay. They are very likely to grow out of it on their own. So that's the whole purpose of the stuttering prediction instrument. So you're going to take the information, like, see this background part, you're going to take the information from your interview and you can fill it in there, or you've already asked all of these questions by now, right? You figured out time since onset. You have talked about, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it highly variable, etc.? And is it typical of, is the speech we're seeing today typical of what your child usually does? And then we've already talked about, we did our family history piece, right? We did our pedigree form. So we've already asked all of these questions too. All right. So there are 3 pages to the stuttering prediction instrument. Again, I do try not to just flagrantly violate copyright, so I just did the first page. So there is a part of it where the only part of it that you're not going to get, like from the SSI score and your interview, I think is like page 3, where you ask these direct questions of the parents, and then there is scoring that goes with that. And then you take the scores from all of the different sections, and that you look at the norm booklet, and it gives you that severity rating. What questions do you have about this? Okay. All right. So the communication attitudes about talking is one that you're going to use with older children. And you should have, oops, hold on. All right. Are you looking at a Word document entitled Children's Attitudes About Talking? Thank you. Okay. So this is one of those. It's similar to the kitty cat, where because it's made by the same people. where it's I don't talk right. And in this case, instead of saying yes or no, it's true or false. So I don't talk right. If they answer true, that gets 1 point because that indicates negative feelings about their talking. I don't mind asking the teacher a question in class. True, 0 points. That's great. Sometimes words stick in my mouth. People worry about the way I talk. My classmates don't think I talk funny. Some of these are a little interesting, but you just keep on trucking and you do all of them. And then here's your answer key in case you can't noodle it through on your own. This is one of those where there's actually a range, and in the example reports that I gave you for your assignment, it has in one of them, at least, there is an example of the score for this measure and the scores that are more typical of kids who stutter versus kids who don't. But the whole purpose of all of this is to get an idea about how the client feels about the way they talk and what their attitudes are. Because if they score really high on one of these measures, then you know that they're really, they're very likely sitting in a place where they're feeling a lot of shame and guilt about or low self-esteem at the very least about being a person who stutters. Okay. Okay. It just popped up a bunch of verbiage and I was like, oh God. Okay. All right. So the next one on the PowerPoint is the locus of control of behavior. It's an interesting one. So let's look at that one. So the whole purpose of doing this one, while I get it pulled up, is there is compelling research that shows that people who have a more external locus of control don't respond to intervention as well as people who have kind of really what you're hoping for is kind of a middle of the road locus of control. So an external locus of control is a things happen to me. I am a victim of my stuttering and nothing I do is going to change that. A internal locus of control would be if I just tried harder, I know I could stop stuttering. And it's all my fault that I stutter. So you can see that neither of those are really great for the self-esteem. So what you hope for is somewhere kind of more towards the middle where you acknowledge that sometimes things happen that are completely outside of your control, but there are things in your life that you do have control over. And as an SLP, you're hoping for at least some of that intrinsic level because that's how you make therapeutic change, right? Like, so the person has to believe that them coming to see you is worthwhile and it might change something, whether it's how they feel about stuttering or the stuttering itself. You need them to believe that they can that they are the architect of that and they can change it. themselves. Does that make sense? It does to Haley. The rest of you, no idea. Thanks, Kelly. So one of the things that's really interesting about this one is that there is research data that shows that people with a more extrinsic or external locus of control don't do as well in treatment because they don't believe that there's anything they or we can do that's going to make anything better. That this is completely controlled by outside forces. So sometimes highly religious people feel this way, which makes sense, right? Like, so if you have this external locus of control, you may feel that God is the architect of your life. And so there's really nothing you can do about this because it's God's will that you have it. So which is fine if a person feels that way. I respect their belief system. um However, if they also have a bunch of guilt and shame about stuttering, then you're kind of left in this terrible middle road spot where um they feel like they've been blighted with stuttering, and there are some things that maybe they could do that would make it better. So one of the things that I use, or I would say, if I felt like the person would be open to it and it wouldn't come across as being disrespectful, is to say, well, maybe God brought you to me so that I can help you with this. And so sometimes people, will feel better feeling like, okay, yeah, maybe that is true. Maybe this is something, maybe by coming here, I can fix this and I'm not um, defying God's will. You see kind of where the conundrum lands. What questions do you have about this? And if they're like, yeah, no, this is God's will, then you say, okay, I respect your beliefs. And then you just know that this is not a person who really is a good candidate for treatment. So at that point, the conversation just completely changes to, so here are what my findings are. What can I do that would be helpful to you? And then you go from there. All right. So the way this one works is, so you see the questions, and so I can anticipate difficulties and take action to avoid them. So so let's say they gave that a 5. And then a great deal of what happens to me is probably just a matter of chance. And they gave that 0. Everyone knows that luck or chance determines one's future. Maybe they gave that a 3. Some of these questions, and I think, okay, I didn't. So in Blackboard, there is the document to scoring. It says scoring key for LCB. Hold on, I'm gonna share my screen. All right. Okay, are you looking at an internet tab that says scoring the LCB? Fantastic. All right, so this talks about some of the questions are foils. So you want to, so whatever, it's on the directions. So questions 1, 5, 7, 8, 13, and 16 are foils. So if on question 1, they said that they strongly agree, which is a 5, you transpose it to being a 1. So in the transposed ones, 5 is equal to 1, 4 is equal to 2, 3 is still 3. And then that's the number of points they get. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So, and then it just tells you a score greater than 30 indicates the person has an external locus of control. So really what you're looking for is something less than 30, but you're really, again, you're looking for something, more mid-range. Not 0, not 30, or not above 30. Any questions about that? Awesome. All right, so the last one in this batch of stuff, let me stop sharing. In Blackboard is the temperament characteristic scale. So this is one that we used only with younger children. I talked about it a little bit last week where I said that it's supposed to be birth to 4. So if you have a kid that's like 7, it's really not as valid as you would like it to be. We used to ask families anyway, but some of the time, but I always felt like probably pushing it to remember perfectly clearly what the deal is after age 5. All right, so temperament characteristic scale. So this is one that you're going to show you're going to turn it around and you're going to, or turn sideways in a non-COVID era and, and go over it with the family. So the directions are in when your child was the ages birth through age 4, or if they're younger than 4 up till now, um, I'm trying to get an idea of personality kind or temperament kinds of things, like how your child's wired. So would you say that your child retreats immediately from unfamiliar people or objects, or that your child approaches people and objects, and so you would use your, or is more likely to, so you would use your little pointer thing. I'm just going to go pointer. All right, so like, let's say that you're going to a birthday party for the sibling, for the client's sibling. So your client doesn't know the people there. Would they be more likely to immediately retreat, or, at a reasonable rate? So a reasonable rate is kind of approaches somewhat like most little kids do not go running pell-mell into a group of unfamiliar people. In fact, that's where the whole stranger danger talk comes in, and I'm not sure that's what you want. So approaches easily has its own set of concerns, whereas the usually retreats may have its own set of concerns as well. So the staying close to the parent. So I would always describe this to people or to other parents as some kids, when you get to childcare or a friend's house or whatever, will just truck on in and get down to the business of playing. And some kids, like my kids, were difficult to separate, as in it took a teacher and me scraping them off on the door frame in order to drop them off at daycare every day. Um, Obviously, again, as my oldest child is now 19 and the twins are 16, I clearly have some PTSD from this. Seriously, they seem fine, but it's the difficult to separate and then hesitant to separate. And then averages kind of takes a look around, maybe is a little hesitant depending on the age, like 2 or 3, maybe they're kind of like, I don't know, but then they go in. The separates easily is the, okay, I'm going to work, hugs, kisses, bye. And they're like, okay. And then the separates very easily is the, you get them out of the car and they're running for the door. Okay. Long period of time to warm up, interact with unfamiliar people. My oldest niece used to, again, said party situation. uh, she would sit in my sister's lap and watch what was going on for a while before she would tentatively go see what was going on. And then like long time to warm up. Remember the client I described last time, the 3-year-old that it took us 6 weeks to get him in the room on a carpet square without a parent or comfort object. That is the epitome of long time to warm up. So the stops play and vocalizing if a unfamiliar person approaches. That's the again, stranger danger to the extreme is absolutely stops. The lack of general awareness is the plays and is unaffected by someone else's approach. You want something kind of in between where they are aware of other people coming into their environment, and maybe they're going to give them a little bit of a side eye and to determine if it's safe or not safe. Okay. Um, all right, Kira, it's just bad form to submit your stuff in the middle of class because it pops up in my email on my screen. I'm just saying. Okay. So the same, I mean, these all go in the same general directions, right? Heightened fears, no unusual fears. So the story I always told is there were a set of twins who were in foster care, and their foster parents took them to the water park, and they had a blast, like best day of their lives, had so much fun. And they were walking out of the park after a completely magical day, and baby A saw a bug on the ground, and that was it. Worst day of baby A's life. That is fearful. Alexis, as a toddler, was terrified of the drain in the bathtub. Like, I didn't know that this was a thing until she was about 12 months old. And I had given her a bath and she was standing there, and I just, pulled the plug out of the drain, and then I was going to pick her up and take her out and dry her off. And she lost her stuff, just went nuts, tried to climb the walls of the shower. And I mean, it was terrible. It was, yeah, that is fearful. And then, you have the kids that almost get hit by it. Like on the other end, you have the no unusual fear. Um, So if a parent's like, well, he's afraid of the dark. Well, that's not really unusual for young children. So you kind of go, that's not an unusual fear. Or he's afraid of tarantulas. Again, not an unusual fear. The afraid of random bug at the water park and total level of freak out, that's next level. That's unusual. And then again, the highly reactive versus not. I would use the example. So you have some kids who, like I had a little girl, Sophia, you just did the same thing.
Sorry, I was gonna forget.
I called Kira out in the middle of everything, and you know.
I know. I literally thought I was gonna forget, so I was like, okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's funny. It's actually funny because I had already given Kira doo-doo about it, and so that made it, yeah, it's a little funny. Okay, so the example I would give is that you have some kids, like I had this one little girl on my caseload who, if her mom put her hair in a ponytail, kid would lose it, like absolutely lose it and tantrum like the hounds of hell were trying to rip her to shreds. I had a 3-year-old little boy on my caseload who noticed when his mom changed her earrings. And I'm not talking like 5-inch hoops to pearl studs. I'm talking pearl studs to diamond studs. The kid noticed. That is highly reactive. Totally notices change in the environment. I think that little guy, actually, I would be so curious. I mean, he's probably like, 30 now. Not really, but he's not. It quite possibly could be graduated from college now. Um, I would not be surprised if he is OCD. He used to get mad. He had 2 older brothers, and he would get mad if they left their socks around, and he would totally complain about it. And he was like a little old lady, and he would, who is leaving their socks around, and it just totally was not having it. So I would be really curious to see how he turned out. And then the not responsive at all, those are the kids that, the house is practically on fire and they're like, it's fine. It'll be fine. Don't care. So that's the TCS, or the temperament characteristic scale. And then in the report that you turned in, you should, I know that was in there. And so you would have had the score for that. Okay. Any questions about any of those, or what questions do you have about any of those? All right. Everybody's clear, like what you do with the information from these, right? Okay, good. So the whole purpose of the temperament characteristic scale is that we know that kids who stutter tend to be more reactive than kids who don't stutter. So on the TCS, they're going to have a higher score. So again, like as you're putting together all of the data from your evaluation and you're making a decision about, is this a child who stutters, and what is the likelihood that this is going to be that this child will be one of the 75 to 80% of kids who start to stutter and grow out of it on their own without treatment. These are the kinds of things you're looking at. You're looking for evidence that tells you that they are not likely to just grow out of it, because severity has nothing to do with it. You may have a kid who is mild and has all of the risk factors for continuing to stutter. And if you don't start treatment at the appropriate time, this it may not stay mild, or you risk having it persist into adulthood. So that's what you're trying to figure out as part of your evaluation. All right, so I'm going to stop this share, go back to the slides. What questions do you have about any of those as I am navigating around? I think the conglomeration of animal hair that I've been ingesting for the last several days is finally caught up to me. Although probably it has nothing to do with the animal hair, and there's like a spot of mold somewhere that I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't breathe. I know none of you probably can relate to that, because I'm sure I'm the only person on the planet with some kind of weird indoor allergy. Okay. Okay, so you should be looking at a slide that says recommendations and referrals. Yay, thank you. Okay, so now you've got all your data and you're trying to figure out, what do I do with this? And yes, I know it's past 6 o'clock and we still need to do our debrief, but I'm not worrying about that, because this is the last part of our slides and we want to move on next week to talking about treatment. And we can't do that because I am professor. I have to go through all the slides or I will suffer terrible consequences. There's a manual and it says, don't cover all the slides, terrible consequences. So bear with me. All right, so now you're trying to figure it all out and you're like, what do I do with all this great information I now have? So the Stuttering Foundation of America is so awesome now that they're not even the Stuttering Foundation of America. They're the Stuttering Foundation of the world. Okay, no, it doesn't say world. They're just the Stuttering Foundation. Like, they have crossed the pond and continents. They're everywhere. And I love the Stuttering Foundation. It is an awesome source of information. I have many of my favorite friends and colleagues do uh, presentations and continuing education events for the Stuttering Foundation. So once you've graduated and you have to get CEUs in order to keep your certification, try out the Stuttering Foundation because they have tons. And the other time to hit up the Stuttering Foundation is when it's been 5 years after graduate school and you don't remember anything from this class and you're like, oh, sweet Georgia Brown, I have a person who stutters on my caseload. So that is when you go to the Stuttering Foundation website and you get your CEU on. Okay. I am not paid in any way by the Stuttering Foundation. That is, I gain nothing from telling you this, other than I think it's an excellent source of information. All right, so we always recommended information from Stuttering Foundation. their website is awesome. There are lots of resources for parents. They have some cute books, like storybooks about stuttering, that you can use in classrooms, or even daycare preschool teachers can use in order to help normalize stuttering for kids, so that you decrease the likelihood of the person who stutters being bullied. Um, One of the things that I found in, so I don't think I told you that when I did my master's degree, 90% of my speech hours were working with people who stutter across the lifespan. The majority of the uh, people I worked with were preschool to school age, but I worked with teenagers, I worked with adults. I worked with Chuck Runyon, who has now been retired from JMU for a while. But I worked with, he had two private practices. He had one in Harrisonburg and one in Winchester. And I was with him 6 days a week. So Monday through Friday, we saw clients in his Harrisonburg office. And then on Saturdays, I would drive the hour to Winchester and we would be there, I think, for like 4 or 5 hours on Saturdays. And I did that all semester long. So I got great experience and massive numbers of hours in stuttering. But um and he was the one actually who told me he felt like I should go on and get a doctorate, or I never would have, never had occurred to me. But before he was my undergraduate advisor. I met him the first time at freshman orientation when I was 17 years old. And I have had beers with him at ASHA, you know, for years and years and years, which is pretty darn cool. But by the time I finished undergrad, he was telling me that he felt like I really should go on to get a doctorate. So he and I spent a lot of time together. And then, but I didn't want to get a doctorate in stuttering because it was a lot of stuttering modification and it was really, really boring. And I was like, I can't do this like for the rest of my life because it makes me want to put something sharp in my eye. And so I got to Vanderbilt, and Ed Contour had just arrived there the same year I did. And he was looking at linguistic aspects of stuttering. So I think I did. Did I tell you this story? No? Okay. So he and I was there because I really was interested in child language and developmental disorders, and especially, early intervention. So it became like this perfect amalgamation of all of this experience I had, with people who stutter, but my interest in preschoolers and language development and all the rest of it. And that's how I actually ended up in stuttering as my area of specialization in my doctorate. Okay. This roundaboutly takes us back to your recommendations. So one of the things that we always asked families to do is and we had this big fancy cease and desist any and all corrections. So we wanted families and caregivers to stop correcting the child's speech. It is not okay. Any of y'all ever been super upset and somebody goes, calm down? And I'm sure if you're anything like me, you're like, oh my God, I'm totally calm now. Thank you for telling me. Like, if you hadn't said that, I'd have just been spun up like forever, right? It's the same thing. If you tell a person who stutters to stop it, it's the same thing. It's just annoying and frustrating and makes them not like you. So, the among a million other things, that are kind of like self-esteem crushing. And because again, when someone's like, calm down, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel like a rational and healthy human being? No, it makes you wonder if you're crazy pants and need to check yourself in somewhere. So telling a person who stutters to calm, to just stop, does not make them instantly fluent. It doesn't make them go, oh yeah, thank God you said that. Now I can totally not stutter, right? So, I'm sorry, Alexis, I'm just now seeing your comment. Which thing when I said younger children?
I believe it was about the temperament scale, but we went through it by saying birth to 4.
It is birth to 4. Yep, yep. So, okay, so I inadvertently answered your question.
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So the cease and desist, not helpful. The Stuttering Foundation has this cool fridge magic. Good God. Yep, fridge magic. We all need it. Fridge magnet about with just different things that parents can do, because a lot of helping parents not be as terrified about their child stuttering is giving them some agency. Here's something you can do. Like my sister and I talk about this all the time. Like I can handle a situation much better once I have a plan, right? Implement a plan. Got something to do. So the fridge magnet gives the family members something that they can do, that is likely helpful to their child who stutters. And that's really important. So it had suggestions like reducing rate of speech, rapid fire, refrain from rapid fire questions, keep your utterances short, keep your turn short, things like that. There's some great books. Sometimes parents, we found that because we did these parent-child groups, and sometimes parents need permission to treat their child who stutters like a child, like any other child. So, with the same rules and expectations, and like it really, kids who stutter should be treated the same as any other child in the family, up to um, with the demarcation line being an expectation that they'll be fluent, but an expectation that they should clean up their rooms or not be disrespectful or any of the rest of that should be all the same. And so sometimes we had different books that we would suggest, or that just gave um, parents permission to be parents, and that's the Books on Parenting suggestion. So then at that point, you've got to decide, well, what am I going to do here? Am I going to make a referral? Am I going to, okay, sorry, I had a moment of not being able to read my watch. Are we going to do a reeval? We're recommending group? Are we, group treatment, individual treatment? Do we need to recommend a psychologist because the family is in crisis? Sometimes, you will talk to plenty of families who are in crisis, and not necessarily a psychologist, like psychologist or counselor or social worker, whatever, licensed professional counselor of some kind. Or sometimes a psychologist because you have concerns about other things that are outside of our scope of practice. Like maybe you are very convinced that the child you just evaluated has ADHD. Well, that's a psychologist um, diagnosis, makes that diagnosis. So, but sometimes families are just overwhelmed. And so the way I would approach that is just to ask, do you have a good support system? And yeah, I have friends. And then a lot of times I would just be very honest and say, I have a therapist that I see because what I've found is that having someone who is not directly connected to everything I'm talking about is really helpful. And having someone who can listen that doesn't have an agenda of their own um, is really helpful too. It's the only person on the planet that you don't have to ask them how their day is necessarily. Certainly just on a human level, you hope they're doing okay, but that's not, like if you're talking to your friends or family, you should give a shit how their day went, right? Um, but if you're talking to your counselor or therapist, you're not there to talk about their day. The only thing you're there to talk about is how you are doing, and that's huge. And as far as I'm concerned, that should be as normal as um, going to the dentist or seeing a doctor. Um, Anything else. It is your mental well-being is every bit as important to any aspect of your physical well-being. And so trying to normalize that for our clients, because having kids who are not typical is incredibly stressful. No matter how mild we diagnose it, it's still really stressful. So, and being a parent in general is really stressful. So anytime you start to add layers to that, that intersection gets to be pretty big. So anyway, those are just some examples of people that you may end up making a referral to. So then you do your paperwork, and that's where that report assignment came from. Is templates are your friend. Your style matters. You should state things in a way that someone, like if your grandma read it, she would be able to understand, unless your grandma is a speech pathologist, and don't give it to that grandma, give it to the other one. But you want to be able to explain, like you want your report to be readable, not just to other speech language pathologists, but to anyone who's reading them. So watch out for that. And I would say that the report, that the template you used is not, there are some places in that are not as readable as they probably should be. So really watch out for that. Use plain language. And where you're using any kind of jargon, make sure you give an example so that someone who's not familiar with the jargon can figure out what you're saying. And attend to the details. So absolutely use find replace, because a lot of times, the thing that really changes in reports usually is that other significant information and then the actual numbers, right? The data. But you don't have to describe the Goldman Fristow and what the range of normal is from scratch every time you write a report. That's crazy talk. So once you have a description that you like, go with it. There is no reason not to reuse that verbiage. And one of the things that you'll find as the speech language pathologist is you get to read all kinds of people's notes. Like as the SLP, you're going to read IEPs from a million different teachers or OT or PT or other speech pathologists. And if you come across some wording that you're like, oh, dang, that's not how I usually put it, but I like that so much better, use it. That is not plagiarism. It's a freaking report, not a work of fiction. It's not a novel. It's a report. Now, that being said, while you're on campus and you're in clinic, don't do that shit. That is a problem. That's not good. But once you're out there in the wider world, you know, using the verbiage of the profession is what you should be doing. And if somebody else seems to have a better handle on it than where you are, then by all means use theirs. Okay, attend to the details, because there was this school psychologist that I wanted to stick a fork in when Tyler was going through the process, the eligibility process early on, who, if I hadn't already disliked him, he had like all these find replace problems in the report. And I was like, dude, I can't even with you right now. Like you're like, I can't even listen to you because your attention to detail and your flapping report is so bad that how do I know that any of the evaluations you gave my child are valid? Like, how do I know that you just didn't, you marked a bunch of stuff wrong that wasn't wrong? So anyway, that kind of thing matters because it will erode your street cred if your report is ADA. All right. So do you have any questions about the assessment process as I have described it, or in general? Or again, I messed up my wording. What questions do you have? Please, by all that is holy, download the stuff that's in Blackboard. It really is there to be helpful to you. And I really, truly believe it would be helpful to you. That's why I put it there. All right. If you don't have any further questions about this, I am going to stop the sharing. And I'm going to stop the recording.